and welcome to Al Jazeera's weekly look inside Syria. I'm Hazem Sika. This week, a close call for Assad. Rebel fighters open fire on his motorcade. Plus, the Syrian Electronic Army strikes again, this time stealing millions of phone numbers. We begin in the Syrian capital, Damascus, where rebel fighters say they've come closer than ever to taking out Bashar al-Assad. They say they fired rockets and mortars on the president's convoy in the early hours of Thursday morning. It happened here in the Malki district of the capital. The area is home to several foreign embassies and is believed to be where the president spends most of his time. Shortly after those reports, Syrian state television aired these pictures of Assad attending Eid prayers in Damascus. It's not known when the footage was filmed, but the government used it as evidence that the president hadn't been harmed. Well, outside Syria, the two-year-old conflict is increasingly taking a toll on its neighbours. On Friday, 2 Turkish Airlines pilots were kidnapped while on a stopover in Beirut. Lebanon's Interior Ministry says the men were taken at gunpoint in a move aimed at pressuring Turkey to withdraw its support for Syrian rebel fighters. A group calling itself Zuwar al-Imam Reda has claimed responsibility. They're demanding the release of 9 Lebanese Shia pilgrims who were captured in Syria last year. Well, for more on the latest security developments, let's bring in our guests. In Beirut, Elias Hanna is a retired Lebanese army general. And from London, we're joined by Middle East security analyst James Denselow. Good to have you both with us. Elias Hanna, how much of a security breach does this represent to you? The fact that the rebels have been able to get this close to Assad in the nearly 2.5 years of this conflict?
It means a lot of things, that the rebels are making some progress in Damascus. Moreover, they are having more intelligence, but it's like a signal. It's like psychological winning or gain, because you cannot really assassinate a president with a mortar shell. However, it means that the proximity of the fighting, it means that he wanted to send the message of strength after Homs and Al-Qusayr. And here comes another message from the rebels. They are making a little bit of progress there, and we will discuss the matter as far as we go in the show.
James Denselow, what's the significance of this attack to you? How much of a morale boost, if nothing else, is this for the rebels?
Well, if the rebels are to be believed and this attack did come close to killing or hurting the president, then of course it's a huge morale boost. They have, of course, in the past succeeded in attacking the inner circle of the regime. They've killed Assad's brother-in-law, they've severely wounded his brother, they've showed they can bomb military targets right in the centre of Damascus. In fact, you could argue that they are far more successful when it comes to their sort of asymmetrical resistance tactics than they are conventional ground-to-ground fighting and holding cities. So the larger narrative is one of the rebels falling back from Qusayr and Homs, but this attack shows that, if it's to be believed, they still have the potential for this golden bullet, killing the leader of the regime, who did look, if the video clips we saw are to be believed, quite shaken up, and I think that could be a huge boost for them.
Let's turn then to the news of the kidnap of the 2 Turkish Airlines pilots. Elias Hanna, how significant is this to you, especially now with the news that Turkey is warning all of its citizens to stay away from Lebanon?
I think Lebanon will be like free of Turkish people, of the Western guests not coming to Lebanon, and will be dominated maybe by Iran or Syria for the next, maybe 1 or 2 years. Moreover, it means how vulnerable the situation, how critical the situation, the security situation in Lebanon, that on the road to the international airport, 2 Turks were kidnapped and nobody knows anything about them. And you have like Imam Rida group claiming responsibility. It's the main airport. Moreover, it will really influence the Turkish decision vis-a-vis the UNIFIL presence in southern Lebanon. It's a major critical security breach for the government. So if a group has done the kidnapping, what the government is going to do vis-a-vis this situation, I think it's critical. However, it's not the first time that kidnapping really happens in Lebanon.
James Denselow, what does this tell you about the situation in Lebanon and the fact that the country seems to be getting more and more drawn into this conflict?
Well, many people have been surprised that the country hasn't yet become more unstable following the civil war in Syria. So this is another worrying chapter in the sort of descent into violence in Lebanon. The return of a kidnapper, obviously a huge feature of the civil war there in the 70s and 80s, something that people will be loath to return on a large scale. A lot of proxy powers are involved in Syria, and now it seems that that proxy conflict is having ramifications in other countries. And it's no surprise, with Hezbollah more involved than ever in Syria, perhaps, that their conflicts with allies of the opposition should start to take form in Lebanon. Of course, the airport in Beirut is in the southern part of the city near to the Hezbollah stronghold, and we've seen in recent weeks, of course, fighting breaking out in Saida, again, kind of around this dynamics of pro and anti-Hezbollah. So again, I think the Lebanese government will have to reaffirm its independence and unity in the face of this challenge. It's difficult, but it's still more or less holding together. And I think international powers in the past have agreed that Lebanon should almost be a neutral space. But I agree with the other guest that you may not see many Turkish senior dignitaries or visitors to the country for some time.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up the point there about Hezbollah, and I want to turn to Elias Hanna on that. I mean, everyone knows that they play quite a dominant role in the Lebanese government. How much of their hand do you see in this, perhaps?
I mean, nobody knows. I don't have really information, but however, I mean, the context itself tells you that there is some ramification for the kidnapped on Azaz in Syria, for the Shia that were kidnapped in Syria. I mean, this group, you can claim whatever you want by a proxy. However, your guest in London said about the Lebanese government, but I should ask, what government, Is it the government, the interim government, or the named the new prime minister, or who's going to take, responsibility for this? To whom you can address the request? However, the president called the Turkish president that he has to do something about the release of the kidnapped, but it's not the same as 1980s, as your guest said in London. It's different context. Hezbollah now, everybody is talking about the ramification of the Syrian civil war into Lebanon, that Lebanon has to be sidelined or in a neutral situation. We cannot do it. I mean, it's not feasible. The option is not feasible, because when you want to do something between rhetoric and means, we have the rhetoric in Lebanon, we don't have the means. Since Hezbollah is already declared his grand strategy to participate in the Syrian war, Al-Qusayr was a major issue, and then maybe Homs, and we have to wait and see what's going to happen. So in Lebanon is like a backyard that is really safe. So we are seeing maybe a major shift of paradigms, or major strategic shift, that Lebanon, instead of being the soft belly of Syria, that the problems of Syria used to come from Lebanon, maybe today we are seeing that Lebanon is the secure soft belly for Syria, that what is Hezbollah doing, So, I mean, we are witnessing something never seen before between Lebanon and Syria. This is the first time that we see like a Lebanese group that going into Syria, fighting and occupying a land and making a major shift in the strategic calculation in the region.
James Denselow, I mean, Elias touched on this a little bit. The point there that this brings up some valid questions, doesn't it? Not just about the security situation inside Lebanon, but also who's really in charge.
Yes, no, I take his point. I think perhaps the unity of the Lebanese army remains the sort of the key moment between a significant descent into more problems in that country. And of course, he's right. When you have Hezbollah as part of the government, it's difficult to sort of see how they can balance their role in Syria with the fact that Turkey, for example, is a partisan player in their eyes towards the opposition. And certainly Hassan Nasrallah has been more outspoken in recent weeks than he's been in a long time, and the commitment to what's happening in Syria is perhaps now fully rather than sort of partial, and people were unsure in the past. So it is very difficult for Lebanon, but I think the point is still that their country is not being engulfed in full chaos despite all what's gone on in Syria and this unprecedented situation which General Hanna points out that we are now in, especially with the refugee numbers, meaning that 1 in 5 people in Lebanon is a Syrian. Although there has been significant problems in Tripoli, there are instances in the Bekaa and of course some rocket attacks and bombings in Beirut. Their centre is still holding for this time, and I guess the question now is, will there be any sort of counteract or sort of result of this kidnapping that could further entrench people to play a proxy conflict with inside the country's borders?
Stay with us, gentlemen. I want to ask you about another development this week. Despite actively pushing for regime change in Syria, US officials are now warning that President Assad's downfall could be dangerous. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, the deputy director of the CIA said Syria's volatile mix of al-Qaeda extremism and civil war now poses the greatest threat to US national security. It is probably the most important issue in the world today because of where it is currently heading. He went on to say that if the government collapses, its weapons are going to be up for grabs and up for sale. James Denselow, is Michael Murrow onto something here? Have things gotten to a point now where the interests of the United States and its partners in the region might be better served if Assad were to stay in power?
I think this is a very live and important question. It's important to note this is the outgoing deputy CIA director, which means he can perhaps speak more freely. But of course, a lot of the intelligence figures and State Department figures in America have been warning us to the consequences of the Syrian civil war, whereas there was a hope for democracy perhaps in 2011 when the Arab Spring took to the streets in Deraa and Homs. Now we see a sort of reborn al-Qaeda in the country, an estimated 6,000 foreign fighters there. US intelligence saying that the numbers of foreign fighters into the country is at a higher rate than ever was the case in Iraq. Al-Nusra Front proving very effective at a tactical level, now fighting against elements of the opposition, the FSA, and the Kurdish groups in the northeast. And then, of course, al-Qaeda in Iraq moving across into Syria, and this very worrying for the Americans' perspective that Zawahiri, the sort of nominal al-Qaeda chief, has been supposedly in contact with these groups operating in Syria. So I think we find ourselves now, from a perspective in Washington, the classic Kissinger phrase that they would rather both sides lost this war.
Elias Hanna, the way things currently stand, could the alternative to Assad be far worse?
I mean, before talking about the CIA declaration of the vice president or vice director, we have to go to General Dempsey, 5 scenarios. So for the United States of America to interfere in Syria, you have like 5 scenarios, and all of them are bad choices for the United States of America. My own opinion is about how the United States of America, now the grand strategy, is looking into the region. I think that they are looking for some balance of power, and they know everything. After especially the bad experience in Iraq, when the state fell at that time, disbanding the Iraqi army. I think that today we are going into Syria, that some gain from the regime, from here, and some from there, some gains from the rebels, into to have like a stalemate, and then we go into a major political calculation or solution where the state or the structure or quasi-structure of the state is still, regardless of who is going to be at the helm of, at the head of the state, President Assad or another President Assad, you know what I mean? So I think that until today, we are not seeing a major solution, political solution. What is tactical will really define the grand strategy or the political solution in Syria, and we are heading maybe toward like a la Lebanese, more than like 10 to 15 years war in Syria.
All right, Elias Hanna and James Denselow, for the moment, thanks very much for your time. Well, moving on to another story in the headlines this week, and the return of the Syrian Electronic Army. The hacking group is well known for its attacks on the media and what it calls Syria's enemies online. But now it's tapped into 2 major smartphone applications, stealing millions of people's emails and phone numbers. Lawrence Lee explains.
The war on the ground in Syria drags on endlessly, but the cyber war being conducted by people apparently linked to the Assad government has taken a new and extraordinary turn.
Once I've got that, now I can pretend to be you and reach out to all of your contacts lists. So
you don't have to be an internet wizard nowadays to know how to execute a hack, and the technique used by the Syrian Electronic Army was frighteningly simple.
The user receives it, it's a one-on-one email, it's got something they expect, they click on it, and nothing really happens untoward. I think we all expect fireworks. Well, at this point, yes. Now they've been compromised. There is some third-party code sitting there on their system that would now start to talk back out to the attacker to say, you now have access to this system.
They discovered that within the space of 8 days in July, the Syrian Electronic Army had breached the world's largest online telephone directory, Truecaller. That's more than 1 billion phone numbers. They hacked the video messaging service Tango, containing personal details and email addresses of millions of users. And they hacked Viber, a free networking app used by 200 million people all over the world. This is the same Syrian Electronic Army which wiped billions off the stock market by hacking the Associated Press Twitter page. It found its way into the Reuters site and posted propaganda cartoons, and has taken responsibility for other attacks on big media organisations. But stealing personal data from social media sites is something else entirely. The really big mystery that's been uncovered by the work of this company is this: what would the Syrian Electronic Army want with all this information that is, after all, the private property of millions and millions of ordinary people around the world who have absolutely nothing to do with the war in Syria? Are they really looking through it all to try to find evidence of opponents of the Assad regime? Or are they instead perhaps on the market for selling it to criminal gangs? At the moment, the truth is, nobody really seems to know. It's not clear what exactly the relationship is between the Syrian Electronic Army and the president. Analysts in London say the SEA's website had been registered by the Syrian Computer Society, which is nominally led by Bashar al-Assad. Behind the scenes, Western security agencies are now trying to work out some of the answers. In the meantime, people who use some of the world's most popular networking apps now know that their details may be in the hands of the Syrian government. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera, London.
Well, joining me now to talk more about this is Sharif Nashashibi, a Middle East analyst based in London. Thanks very much for being with us. So how much do we really know about the Syrian Electronic Army and about their relationship with the Assad regime?
Well, we don't know very much, and I think this is done on purpose by the SEA and the regime. They have kept details about the organization very ambiguous, very unclear. We don't know exactly the relationship between the two. We don't know whether the SEA is actually part of the regime. We do know that there is a direct relationship. Bashar al-Assad has praised the SEA. He has spoken of them as if they are a virtual wing of his own army. But the ambiguity suits them, I think, because it means that one side is not necessarily directly linked to the actions of the other. And certainly the anonymity of members of the SEA is important, as anonymity is in the hacking world in general, so that their members cannot be punished, cannot be found or tracked. So there is a large air of mystery, and that is done on purpose to stop people really knowing exactly what is going on behind the scenes of the SEA and the regime itself.
And what about the extent of all of this hacking? I mean, Lawrence Lee made a very valid point there in his report. Why would the Syrian Electronic Army what would they want to do with the private information of millions of individuals have nothing to do with this conflict? Could they be trying to sell it on to a third party for money, perhaps?
Well, I think there are three potential reasons for this. Some people have speculated that they might be sifting through all this data to get relevant data about Syria. I find this doubtful because they would need an incredible amount of manpower. I mean, the kind of manpower that the US government has to do that. So I think that's doubtful. It would be easier and more likely for them to sell that information on, and they can use the proceeds for things directly related to their cause. Another thing could be simply flexing their muscles, telling the world, look, here we are, this is what we're capable of, we're getting better and stronger, and expect more of this to come. There is, in the hacking world in general, there is an element of showing off, and this could be them showing off and saying, this is what we're capable of.
Well, of course, hacking isn't the only way to grab people's attention. This is what I want to ask you about next. The Syrian president has launched his own Instagram site, posting dozens of photos online. Among them are shots of Assad and his wife at work and visiting hospitals and schools and so on. For the most part, the couple appear to be smiling and having a good time. The US State Department, though, has described the site as repulsive and out of touch with reality. What do you make then of the Assad Instagram account? Is it just another propaganda tool, or is this basically for his own supporters' consumption?
Well, it is obviously a propaganda tool. I think the Instagram account on its own is not really big news. I mean, I think it only really captured people's attention because Instagram is the new big thing in social media. But the Assads have been using YouTube and Facebook and Twitter for some time. So I think Instagram is part of the regime's wider strategy of using the social media for its propaganda purposes. I think what's interesting, I think, in this case is that this propaganda is not aimed at winning over opponents. I mean, people who hate Bashar Assad will still hate him regardless. I think the message is being directed towards his supporters to tell his supporters, look, here I am, I'm here to stay, I'm doing all this good for our people, and I'm not in an underground bunker somewhere, I'm out there and I'm making a difference, so continue to support me. I think this is aimed at his supporters. I think also the increased use of the social media could be a sign that the use of Western PR firms, which the Assad regime has used, is not working. I mean, a stark example is the article in Vogue magazine a couple of years ago, which called Asma al-Assad a rose in the desert. And this was while her husband was slaughtering Syrians. And there was so much criticism of the article that Vogue disowned the article and took it off its website. So I think the use of PR firms possibly is not working for them. So they feel that they are better able to use the social media. And they've certainly been more effective at using it than, for example, other Arab leaderships that have come under pressure in the Arab Spring.
Staying with the theme of propaganda, I want to ask you as well about the reports earlier this week of this attack on Bashar al-Assad's convoy, where the first reports, when they initially came out, were early on Thursday morning, and they were all coming from the rebel side on social media, on things like Twitter. And then within a couple of hours later, we had on Syrian state television Bashar al-Assad appearing in the mosque for Eid prayers. How important was that from the point of view of the regime to make sure that they got the president out there and that everything was okay, and that these reports from their side that there was nothing to be believed?
Oh, I mean, it was vital. I mean, they had to let their supporters know straight away that your leader is still alive, he's not injured, he's well, and he's not in hiding. This was absolutely vital. I mean, there is a PR war, a cyber war going on between the opposition and the regime. I think the regime has learnt from the ineffectiveness of the PR strategies used by other Arab regimes that have been toppled, such as Muammar Gaddafi and Hosni Mubarak. You know, they've abandoned the kind of antiquated methods that the older Arab leaders in the region have used, and they are more media savvy and PR savvy. And they've realized that, the opposition is making use of these methods, so must we. You can imagine the kind of havoc that would have been caused for the regime if they had not swiftly put out video footage saying, look, Bashar Assad is alive and well, don't worry.
All right, and just briefly, I want to ask you then, is there a feeling then that, that the Assad regime was kind of playing catch-up in all of this?
Yes, certainly. I mean, the Arab leaderships in general have been slow to adapt to this. But the Assad regime has done better than the others, partly because they've learned from the mistakes of other Arab leaders, but also because Bashar Assad is a younger leader than a lot of the other leaders in the region. Him and his wife have lived part of their lives in the West, so I think they are much more media savvy, tech savvy, PR savvy. And they've realized that this will shore up the support, among their traditional supporters. It's not going to win the hearts and minds of people that are already against them. This is aimed at convincing their supporters to keep supporting them.
All right, thank you to Sharif Nashashibi, and thank you to our other two guests, Elias Hanna and James Denselow. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Syria. Remember, we're back next week with an all-new discussion. I'm Hazem Sika. Bye for now.